Hi everyone, welcome to week 7 of your Introduction to HIPAA course. This week we are going to look at the first part of chapter 4. And in chapter 4 we're going to be looking at some of the reasons that we need to safeguard what we call EPHI. We're going to look at some of the basic safeguards that are in place for that. And then also moving into next week, we're going to look a little further into the HIPAA security officer and how the government actually oversees that compliance. But let's look first at the first part of the chapter. Like I said, we're only going to cover pages 82 through 92. So this is actually talking about the security rule. So the security piece of HIPAA. So let's think a little bit about what's the difference between security versus privacy. So that's one of the key topics that you're going to be, touching on is security versus privacy. And really when we think about security, what that means is the ability for someone to access our private information. So as we go through this, it's going to talk about, how to limit the access to the data. In other words, how can we keep people from being able to access the data? We're going to be looking at the different safeguards in these different categories: administrative, physical, and technical, and some of these safeguards that are mandated and some that we can actually do something about, address. So these are some of the core areas of security that they are going to talk about. When we talk about ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI, when they talk about EPHI, what they're talking about is the electronic health records, so the electronic protected health information. So keep in mind that not everything that is our protected health information is out there available electronically. Of course, more and more is available electronically, but not everything is. So this is specifically around EPHI when they're talking about that. And then what do we do if there's some sort of, unanticipated disclosure? What happens then? What are some things that could happen to cause that? Maybe somebody's hacked into a server, things like that. What are some of the threats that we can or hazards that we can protect against? And then how do we comply? How do we make sure that we follow those rules? So as they talk about administrative safeguards, one of the things that is in place is that we have to have some sort of security officer required. So what that means is we're going to have someone whose job is to make sure that the safeguard requirements of the rule are being met. So they have a lot of different things. They're going to, they have a lot of things that they're going to oversee. They have to have contingency plans on, what's going to happen if that is, if the data does become out there and available. Who is going to be responsible for that? Those types of things. So as you go through this, you have to kind of think about all those different situations of what ifs is what this is kind of all about the what ifs. One of the true stories that they have listed this week is on the bottom of page 89. It's all about a physician who was diagnosed with AIDS at the hospital where he practiced, and so his privileges for surgery were suspended. And so they want to know, why is this a security issue and not just a privacy issue? Those types of things are some of those things that you're going to want to think about. So why is this a security issue? In other words, why is the fact that this particular physician that has AIDS, why is it security and not just privacy? So we have to look at it kind of from both sides of the fence. In other words, why do we have to make sure that, his information is available to a certain extent? Because of course we want to make sure we keep our patients safe as well. So he's a patient, but he's also an employee. So it kind of, again, looking at both sides of the fence there. So as you go through this, you always want to be thinking of all of those what ifs. That's kind of what this section is all about. So, disaster plans, what happens if there's a tornado? What happens if there's a hurricane? All of those kinds of things. So as you go through this week's material, if you have any problems or questions, please make sure that you reach out to me, and have a great week.